another episode of With the Chiefs.
Wait. Man, I need more rest.
I hope I've got your last name right there.
It's a very good pronunciation.
You should know better than that now, Dom.
I know.
Welcome back to another episode of With the Chiefs. Today we're lucky to be joined by Robby Wade. Robby is the CEO and founder of ThisApp, a mobile app that aims to be the next generation of chat, going to head with giants like WhatsApp. Robby is also an avid runner, and I guess we're curious to talk to him today about the kind of role that running has played in his life. So, Robby, thanks for joining and welcome to the show, mate.
No problem. I'm actually humbled to be here. This is probably one of the podcasts I'm more nervous for. I'm in the presence of greatness here. It's one of those things where you guys are like good runners and stuff, and definitely looking to digging in.
Okay, that's going to be another testimonial, Dom. What do you reckon? Thanks, Robby. No, appreciate it. We normally sort of start off the chat just with a bit of a training update. So maybe just run us through, what your weeks look like so far in terms of training and exercise.
Absolutely. I'll probably start, probably easiest is just to talk about what I did this week, because once it gets beyond that, it gets pretty hard to remember. But it's been pretty heavy lately. I have sort of like four big, I guess you'd say like events coming up. So the four events that I got coming up are the San Francisco Marathon next weekend. And then I've got a 3K open water swim a week later, which is like going to be interesting. I'm in San Francisco, but the swim is from Alcatraz, like back to shore. So kind of like a escape Alcatraz kind of like swim, but it's open water. The current's like very aggressive, super cold. It's definitely not a fun time. And then a week after that, I've got a 50 mile trail run in Redwood.
Wow.
And then in September, I'm doing the Santa Cruz Ironman 70.3. So the next 3 months is pretty busy in that sense. So my load's been pretty high, and I've heard you guys talk on a couple of podcasts about those little injuries that creep up as you get towards races. Like, when you've been loading up, I'm definitely feeling that. But my week this week, I do Sunday to Sunday. So I'll probably just go there. I actually was sort of anticipating this question, so you probably see me reading. I actually wrote all this down just so I could remember, because I've listened to your podcast a couple of times. Because I've got the Ironman 70.3 is actually a half Ironman. A lot of people get confused by that. It's not a full one. I'm not there yet, but so I've got a fair bit of like I guess you'd say like a triathlon schedule. So there's a lot of running, but also swimming and riding and stuff like that mixed in between. So Sunday I did about 40K. I did a 40K ride. I did a 2.5K pool swim. And then I did a 15K run. So Sundays, is pretty much a full day of exercise almost by the time I got through that. Monday, I did a bit of strength, upper body in the gym, and then just a 5K run after the big day on Sunday. Tuesday, a 15K ride, and then a 2K open water swim. Wednesday, a 25K ride, and then I spent some time on the track. I actually hadn't been on the track in a really long time. I've heard you guys talk about it in your podcast and stuff, and I joined this club recently, and they do a lot of track work, and I actually had heaps of fun. I usually just like go out on long runs by myself and all those kind of things, but we did a couple of 5-minute 2 5-minute sets at 10K pace, then 2 3-minute sets at 5K, and then a couple of 400-meter all outs and stuff. And yeah, it was super fun because I don't really do a lot of just like short distance sprint work. I know it's good for speed. It's probably why I'm not that fast, but hopefully the track will help with that. And then on Thursday, I did I do every now and again, I do like a ruck, usually in the morning. So I have like a 15 kilo weight vest. I went for about a 7K. I wouldn't call it a run. It's kind of like in between a walk and a run. It's like a stumble, I guess you'd call it for 7Ks. A 5K run in the afternoon, did a bit of strength in the afternoon and a swim as well in the pool. Today I did a 17K bike ride, and then it was, I wouldn't call it a hill run. It was kind of like a mountain run. It's like it was only 7Ks up and down, but like a thousand, about 1,200 feet over 7K. So it's pretty steep. Nothing ridiculous, but like I wouldn't call it a hill sprint or anything. Like it's definitely a mountain in that sense. So I did that this morning. Tomorrow I've got a 50K ride, and then I'll probably do a 10K run after that. And then on Sunday, doing a big trail run. I'll probably do like a half marathon trail run, just to get myself ready for the marathon the weekend after. But yeah, that's Sunday to Sunday. So fair bit of work this week. But definitely feeling good though. Like I used to mainly do running, but since getting into the tri stuff, I've found that just mixing things up a little bit, my muscles seem to just fare a little bit better. And an unexpected sort of benefit of the swim is I find that my like my joint recovery is better. I don't know. There's something about the swim that it just like loosens up my knees and my ankles and stuff from running. It sort of like offsets all of that like compound pressure because you're like in the pool for long periods of time. So yeah, even though this is probably a heavier week than usual, but if I was just all out running, I can definitely say I'd be sore and more tired and all those kind of things. So yeah, that's my week. How about you guys?
Dom, that's a big week, by the way.
Thanks.
And a lot of different elements, and the schedule sounds very David Goggins. It's like lots of crazy events sort of scheduled in a close period of time.
Yeah. And I think like, I work behind a computer, right? So like I sit at my desk for 8, 9, 10 hours a day in that sense. So, I try to do like an hour or two in the morning, an hour or two in the evening. And I live in San Francisco. My family is not here. Like, I work remotely. I don't have to commute to the office. Like I have kind of time to do these things. And like, it sounds like a lot, but like, I go for a 10K run in the morning, sit down for like 9 hours and then go for a 2K swim in the afternoon. Like it's not like these things are like back to back. So I'm fortunate enough to have kind of the time to do that and to be able to recover in between sessions as well. Like, and 8 hours in between a session is quite a long time in that sense.
Yeah. And it's not like, obviously the nature of knowledge work is you're not really expending energy in those, or physical energy in those.
Yeah, absolutely.
In that time. But yeah, anyway, I'm sure we'll dig more into how you got to that week. But Dom, what's been happening with you? Bit of an unfortunate event this morning.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's been a pretty crazy week. Or not really. Been on holidays. So, I've just kind of decided to just shut it down this week and take the week off pretty much.
Interesting. That must have been big for you. How often do you do that?
Oh, this is the first time in a long time.
I thought so.
First time hearing of it.
Yeah. I think
How did it feel? Was it weird? Like, were you like, do you have like itchy feet and shit? Like, what'd you do with all your time?
I don't know. Not really. It was like, on holidays. So we're up at Noosa and just doing lots of like hikes and surfing and stuff like that. So there's plenty of exercise, but just not much running.
What you'd call a week off, someone else would call like a full week of exercise in that
sense. But it's been really fun. Like I've just I think I needed it after like COVID and everything. I think that I was just kind of like delaying the inevitable. Like you need to rest eventually, and there's no point sometimes in just pushing. So it's been really good just to reset and not have to like think about work or anything. It's been really refreshing. But we got up to Noosa on Monday. I was pretty tired after watching Kyrgios in the tennis. So the surf was like probably the best that day though. So I was kind of annoyed in hindsight, thinking like shit, like I should have gone for a surf. But the one that got away, oh well. Tuesday was like a rainy day.
Did Kyrgios win? I didn't watch it.
Win.
No, wasn't
he won the first set. I was thinking, we could be on here, but no, 4 sets. Djokovic got him. But Tuesday it was a rainy day and all the surf was gone. And I was like, oh shit. But it was all right. Still went for a swim with my girlfriend, which is good. I got on the treadmill that day actually and just jogged for like an hour and did a bit of stuff in the gym. And then Wednesday there wasn't much surf. We went surfing anyways. Thursday we hiked like all the way around this headland to a little surf spot called Tea Trees, which was really, really fun. And then Friday we drove back to Brisbane for our flight on Saturday, which was meant to be at 9 a.m. today, but got cancelled.
And now you're missing Scotty's party. I was talking to him as you messaged him. He was devastated.
I don't know, stewing, but yeah, it was pretty annoying. Like they cancelled it at 5 a.m. in the morning when we were like pretty much ready to go to the airport, or we had already started heading out to the airport, and we misread the rebooking. We thought it was for 7 a.m. today instead of 7 a.m. tomorrow. So we were really scrambling trying to like get to the airport. Then we rechecked our phones and realized, oh shit, this is for tomorrow. So
what was the reason they cancelled it?
They said operational issues, so it's pretty vague. But
it's pretty bad at the moment, man, around the world. That's a whole separate topic we could talk about, but just the airline industry in general and the lack of staff and delays and all that kind of stuff, it's really bad. But yeah, sorry to hear that.
Yeah, no, it kind of sucks, but it's just like annoying being in that limbo, like, oh shit, we got to organise accommodation now and go through that whole process. Like your brain just kind of flips into this weird sort of panic mode. Like, so we were kind of, we went and got coffee and just chilled out a bit and started figuring out how we're going to book accommodation. And we got lucky finding this place that we're in now. But yeah, once we walked in the door, it was like just the pressure was off. So that's how it sort of unfolded. But what about you, Smitty? How's your week been?
Quick question, Dom. Don't you have an ultra coming up or something? Didn't Scotty said you were in Queensland for an ultra?
Yeah. So that was last week. Just after having COVID, I think it was like 11 days after I tested positive. So I ran the first 47 Ks of it, and I don't know, just like mentally my headspace wasn't there, and I was pretty cooked. Like I couldn't even walk anymore. I couldn't even run anymore. It was just like
walking. Did you DNF?
Yeah, pulled out.
Yeah. How far was it?
It was meant to be 100 miles, but it was like a lot of elevation. I think it's 8,000 meters of elevation. So
have you done 100 mile before?
No, never.
And you're going to do it 11 days after COVID. Fair enough.
Yeah. But oh well. What about you, Smitty? How's your week been going?
Yeah, pretty good. I think because we recorded on Tuesday, I can't remember where I got up to, but essentially still in a week of so after the half marathon, now still in a week of retesting power metrics. So what I do Monday. Oh yeah, I think I already talked about this, but I'll just say it again just in case I didn't. I'm going a little bit crazy, but did some sprint testing, which is pretty not normal for me. So I did like 10 second, 15 second and 20 second max sprints to sort of establish the high end power. That was good. It's kind of like, I found it, this might be reflecting on what I've already said, but I found it not going to, like, when you do a 400 meters around the track, you start then really hurting. It's kind of, that kind of mode is before you really start hurting, and then it catches up with you. So it's before, it's like it's not like a hard, it's not like a hard 400 or a hard 200. So I found it pretty manageable when during that testing, it's like generous rest. You're walking around. It's not like you're kind of just testing. So this is not a normal part of training. I think it's what Sally does, my coach, after you do a race, just to reassess, and then you can use different metrics going back into training. But anyway, so I think that was Monday. I should have written this down. Looks like you guys were much more prepared.
I had to go back through my watch and stuff. I knew it was coming, so I was like,
Wednesday, what was it? Wednesday was, what did I do? No, I recently did a 5 minute max. That was yesterday. Sorry. That was yesterday. And so I'm not used to doing max testing. I'm definitely not used to running in that sort of on that limit. So what happened was I went out basically like it was an 800, because when I look at my program, it says in this one, it said basically sprint like as hard as you can for 5 minutes. So I've gone out sprinting, and then like you feel good for about, I don't know, few minutes, and then I just went so far backwards, like so far backwards. I remember running, I don't know what the pace was, but yeah, it was like I ended slower than my 5K pace. So not a good sign. But that's a bit of a learning curve, and I hope that, like, for example, when we assess the data, Sally will be able to tell, what my peak was during that 5 minutes, not the whole 5 minutes. But yeah, it's interesting. It's a different type of running. But today I did nothing. I actually went for a walk around the bay with Mum. So she's back into training for Melbourne, which is good. So it was nice to just kind of walk around and chill out. This week overall is not going to be much mileage. I think it's going to be about 40 Ks. So it's one of the smaller weeks for sure that I'll do. And then tomorrow I've got something interesting. I've got like a 3-minute max test and a 9-minute max test. So probably some of the grimmest work I'll do, to be honest. Like, I don't know how to run a 3-minute max. Like, I'm already worried about blowing up, and I'm not nowhere near it. And then 9-minute max is like, it's halfway. It's just before, sort of 5K pace. And again, I'm not seasoned. Like, most of my training's been half marathon and marathon training. so that'll be interesting. And it's weird. I put this unnecessary pressure on myself as well for, like, it's testing. Yeah. I don't know, but it'll be interesting to see what I can do. So I think I'm going to treat it like a bit of a 3K time trial, because it'll be just over. Oh, who knows? Depends how I pace it. But yeah, I'll treat it like a bit of a time trial. And then
I feel like those distances kind of like make me more nervous in some way. Like when I was at the track the other day, when they were like, yeah, run, 3 minutes as fast as you can, I was like terrified compared to like doing
yeah.
I was like,
yeah.
That's like what you're saying. But
yeah.
It's scary.
No, absolutely. It is scary. And I think because Sally she's been an ultra runner, and she said like the 5K event scares her like more than, or it's a lot more difficult to get that right than sometimes running an ultra, even though a lot can go sort of wrong in an ultra just by sheer like how long the event is. But the 5K, which we've talked about this on the podcast before, it's like you're running on the limit all the time, and it's so hard to find the limit because you sort of, your mind gets in the way, and it's one of the most difficult. That and 10K.
I haven't actually done I've done 5Ks by myself, but not in like a environment. I was actually pretty disappointed because next week at the track they have like a public event where like heaps of different clubs are coming in. People are trying to hit their 5K best, and I was like, oh, that would have been really good to do, but I feel like it would be foolish to try to hit my 5K PB 3 days before I run the San Fran Marathon. Probably not the best. Best day. Probably not the best way to do it.
Probably not max out. Maybe I don't know. No, you got more races scheduled after that. So.
Yeah, I don't know if my ego. Someone was like, "Oh, just go and take it easy." I was like, I don't know if my ego could handle it. There's like a stadium full of people trying to run their PBs. Like, as if you can
There's no way.
take the accelerator off. It's not going to happen. Like,
no.
Yeah.
No, definitely not, Robbie. I remember going back into training a few months ago, and you do like sort of a park run. I was like, I'm going to do this at threshold, like 20-minute threshold. No way. Like I was gunning it, just trying to win the thing. And I've done a 5K race. Sometimes you can I find at least I can have the best intentions, but like if you got people around you running at a certain pace,
and I swear you always feel like it when you're not allowed. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's the days where you're actually allowed. You never actually want to like send it. But as soon as you're not supposed to, like you're like injured or something like that, you're like, maybe it's like one of those things where you just like that child in you comes out and you just want to rebel or something. It's like, you're not supposed to, you just do it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, but anyway, this is a reminder to maybe I'll write my training week down so I can be more structured. But
I actually think it's great. Just a bit of feedback for you guys. Like, I think it's cool that you do it. I've never listened to a podcast that does it, and it's cool. You don't really get to hear people's like training schedules in that much detail. Like people will kind of give you like a high level of what they're doing, or they might say, yeah, like, I go out for a few runs, or they might say something like, I do 120 kilometers a week or something. But
Yes.
like, what does that look like? Like, do you do it? Like, is it split between days? How many days do you do that over? Do you do it in long runs, short runs, track runs? Like, and I think it's cool that you guys break that down, because you get to see so many different like training perspectives, I guess you would say.
Yeah. And obviously we've like doing so many episodes, we've learned so much. Like we thought we had I thought at least I had some understanding of running, but yeah, it's only just the beginning once you start talking to other runners, I guess.
But it's also weird. Like, there's no rules. Like, you look in the ultra world. There's what's her name, Courtney Dauwalter, and then I was just listening to a podcast with. Let me just quickly grab her name. Camille Herron, and like they're both like the best in the world in ultra marathons essentially, but their like regimes are like opposites. Like, Courtney Dauwalter eats whatever she wants and just goes on long runs every day, has no coach, completely unscheduled. And then Camille is like diet super strict, does short runs, doesn't actually do any long runs in her training because she's like, a short distance runner and all that sort of stuff. And like, they're both breaking records and both the best in the world, but almost like polar opposite styles, like in that sense. So that's the hard part, because you can collect so much information, and then trying to like distill that to like what actually works for you is like the second part, because it still has to remain fun, otherwise you don't want to do it.
Well, that's what I've often thought, is like you tend to analyze it in your head, and you're like, how much of that actual analysis results in, the like, is that actually the cause, or there's just so many variables that go into even something as simple as, doing a few sessions a week. Which is interesting.
For sure.
But so I guess to end that summary, very excited to get into more structured training next week and start training for like sort of, I really like that. I like the structure of, doing your threshold, doing particular sessions, and doing a little bit more mileage, to be honest. I'm not a big fan of like sort of not, not doing long runs and that sort of thing. So keen to get back into it. But anyway, so Robbie, just curious to know, like, how did you actually get started in running? Like, how far does it go back for you?
It's funny. I was talking to my girlfriend about this today. You can always kind of like go back to your past and sort of like see who you sort of become when you're when you're older. I don't know if you guys listen to Andrew Huberman, the podcast.
Yeah.
This might seem like a little bit of a side of it, but I'll come back. But he was like talking about how when he was a kid, he used to like read books and like then want to get up in class and like lecture everyone on what he just learned. And like he used to like go to like the carnival, and people getting like goldfish from like some game or something, he'd be trying to educate them on putting chlorine in the water and whatever. And like, you look at what he's doing now, and like, that's what he does for a living. And, when I was a kid, like I was like always like trying to like sell things. And I was also like, my sport was kind of like cross country, like in that way. So like I ended up like running and kind of selling things in that way. So it's like one of those things where it sort of like transcends over your career. But I was quite sporty when I was a kid, but there was a bit of a gap in between like my teenage years where I just sort of like dropped out completely. So I did like cross country. So sort of like long, like that's kind of like, I guess, long distance running in kid speak essentially. But, and played soccer and whatnot. And then throughout my teenage years, I, did a little bit of gym work, but basically no training whatsoever. It's probably one of my biggest regrets. I just didn't like, I had a story that I wasn't good at sport, and I was kind of like I was like a smaller kid, like still kind of am, but I was never the fastest, fittest, strongest, nothing. And so when you're a teenager, you just kind of like, screw this, like I'm this isn't for me. And it took me a long time to really get back into training properly. I don't remember the specific moment when it happened. But a lot of my influences, like as you sort of mentioned before, like people like David Goggins and, like your Jesse Itzlers and all these kind of people, like just started sort of listening to these kind of podcasts and just like running more and more. And a good friend of mine, Peachy, was doing a lot of running at the time. And so that kind of just like got me into it. And the sort of transition point where, what I kind of noticed, like I was getting, how old are you guys? Just age wise, like you guys my age. I'm 29.
28.
How old are you guys?
28.
Okay, cool. Yeah, like, do you guys notice that, like, outside of your running friends, basically none of your friends can run? There's like something wrong with their back or something wrong with their knee, or just like
Yeah.
you have like running friends, then everyone else is like 90 years old, right? For whatever reason. And anyway, like, I just realized like I wasn't having the same issues that other people were having. Like, I didn't have a knee issue or an ankle issue or a back issue, or like I could just go and like not stretch and just run out of my house and run 10Ks, and like I was fine, like, in that sense, and my body could handle it really well. And so that's kind of what's been how like that's kind of just how it started. And I just sort of picked up the mileage week, like month after month after month. And I guess the turning point was like really diving into sort of David Goggins's work for sure, and doing his my first like quote unquote ultra was like his 4:48 challenge.
Oh, yeah.
You guys are familiar with that? Yeah. And I did
Yeah,
that and
yeah.
I finished it and I was like, oh wow, like, okay, like I can do this. And ran a marathon, and then I was like, oh, I can do this, and then ran more and more and more. And you guys how I know it is. You finish your first couple of races and it's sort of all over, and then it becomes part of your identity. Everybody sees you as somebody who runs these races and uh, trains all the time, and it just doesn't really stop. Like, in that you start making friends who do those kind of things, and yeah, that's kind of. But yeah, so that's where running came from for me. So it's hard to say whether it goes back to the start per se. But yeah, it's been pretty serious for the last, say, 3-ish years, maybe 4 years.
Mm. And what about sort of David Goggins's message? Like, what resonated with you? Because obviously like that message hits people in a certain way, and it's kind of
Yeah.
different for everyone. So what do you
Yeah,
think?
I went through like a pretty bad mental health bout in my early 20s, like probably between the ages of like 20 and 22 or 23. I had like pretty serious anxiety. My dad was sick like my entire life. He had like a kidney transplant and whatever. And I haven't really figured out where the anxiety came from. I went from like super confident, no anxiety, to just like full blown like uh riddling anxiety, and like to the point where like I couldn't train. I go to the gym and get anxiety and all these kind of things. And I think coming out of that, just like that sort of Goggins mindset really helped me, like in that sense, like that like in a bitch, and like like his whole like thing. And I don't know, it just kind of like it really helped, like in that sense. And I started just doing everything that I didn't want to do. Like, if I'd train, my heart rate would go up and I'd get like, anxious or whatever would happen. Like that guy was having a heart attack or whatever. And I'd just be like, okay, well, we've never had a heart attack. We're going to run 10Ks and see what happens. And like, I just like kept doing that and like quote unquote running into it. And yeah, like during that time, like that Goggins time, I like, went and learned how to skydive and did all these things that were just like ridiculously terrifying for me. And then just, yeah, it worked like completely, to the point where it's almost the opposite side now, where I'm almost not anxious enough about things, like in that sense. So yeah,
So
that's
yeah, that's interesting, because I think a lot of people can resonate with feeling. It's funny when you like, just personally, when you're anxious, the natural thing is to withdraw. Like
yeah,
you don't want to, like, you don't want to immerse yourself. For example, with something like, I don't know, something I get anxious about is like public speaking or these kinds of things, where you like, the last thing you want to do is put yourself in that situation. But I think
yeah.
the Goggins message, like you're describing, is like a pure exposure therapy almost.
For sure, for sure. I think
Yeah.
like something I've kind of realized, and that his whole like 40% rule, which you guys would know familiarly, is like, once you understand the 40% rule, and like when you think you're beat, you're only at 40%, like, and you test that rule, it's very, very true. But back to what you were saying about leaning into things, like something that's really become clear to me, and like, look, I know there is like genuine mental health issues and stuff like that, but I think conceptually, anxiety and depression can kind of be like a little bit of an energy imbalance. And so like public speaking is a good example for this. Like anxiety is almost like you've got too much energy for this given situation. So if I was nervous for this podcast, I might go for a run before I sit down and talk to you guys, because it just means I've got too much energy leading into this. And a good way to think about it is if like you've got a car in park and you're like revving the engine, it's sitting there and it's like vroom, vroom, it's like sitting there and like it's like trying to go. It's like a way you guys will think about this is like you're sitting at the start line of a run. You're super anxious, but as soon as you start running, that anxiety's gone because you've like changed it from park into drive, right? Like you've got the energies where it's supposed to be. Like you've channeled it to where it needs to be. And I think depression is the opposite of that. It's like you need to try to bring more energy into your ecosystem. So like sometimes running can take away energy or bring in energy, or you need to find a project to work on that gives you energy, or find a relationship that gives you energy, or something. Like you don't have enough. It's you're drained in the other capacity. So that's sort of helped me in thinking about these kind of things as well, is like, you know, when you're about to public speak, like your body's giving you the energy that you need. Like I think about this in the analogy of like, say, skydiving. Like when I'm sitting in the plane, I'm terrified about to jump out, right? But like that heightened sense of alertness is what keeps me alive when I get outside. Like I actually need to get into that state. And like when you're at a start line for a run, your body's like priming yourself for what you're about to go through. But it's hard to think of it that way because it doesn't feel like that in that sense.
That's a really interesting perspective. It's like, but then you feel blind. It's almost like you're blind. You can be blind, but the sheer awareness is kind of key, like you're describing.
For sure.
Like example, I'll give an example. Like if I do a really hard session in the morning, and then like I have something I'm nervous for at work, I do feel like just calmer. Like a lot calmer. And even if you're anxious, it's just the brunt of it kind of gets taken out, if that makes sense. You
almost like don't have enough energy to be anxious anymore.
Yeah. or like after like a long run, say you do 30K, and then you like put a bit of a stint in at the end, it's like you're just going to be cooked, and you feel, even though your body could be extremely tired, but you feel at peace. I've described it. It's like a at peace sort of feeling. Dom, what do you like? Have you had similar experiences from in terms of anxiety as well and lowering it?
Yeah, I think with running, like the anxiety around doing a session or trying to hit times. There goes my camera. But yeah, that's like really, really bad. And I think usually like I can just be beating myself up all day thinking about, this session I'm going to do in the afternoon. And then like once I start running, it's never that bad. And if I can just like try and put myself in the moment while I'm doing the session, it usually results in something much better. But it's hard to kind of just shut your brain off sometimes. But that's a whole nother sort of different story. But yeah, I think it's a really, really good insight though. So yeah, thanks for sharing.
How was your mindset leading into the 100-mile post-COVID?
It was really hard. Like I think because I kind of had this, I've been thinking about this race for like 6 months, and I was talking about it every week on the podcast and getting so excited for it. But getting COVID, everyone starts telling you shouldn't be doing this. You look up like medical facts and stuff, and it's like, no, there's no way you should be doing this. And that little voice in the back of your head slowly starts to just get a little bit louder. And like on the start line, I was kind of thinking I'll give it my best go, but I kind of knew I wasn't going to finish the race before I'd even taken the first step. But I gave it the best like shot I could, but there was just no way. Like I got to that 47K mark and I was absolutely cooked. Like I wasn't even that disappointed in pulling out, just because I knew that there was no chance I was going to finish it.
But we wrecked afterwards. Like did it deplete you?
I was pretty tired, and my legs
like
are
more
pretty
than you
sore.
usually would be. Like just in terms of your overall fatigue.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. Like it wasn't shocking though. Like I was running within a couple of days still, and I feel fine now. A week after, like I guess it's 100 miles, and I only ran 47 Ks of it, so the effort probably wasn't quite the same as it would be if I was just running flat out for 47 Ks. But yeah, I don't know.
Damn.
Yeah,
Well, 100 mile is a big bucket list, so you have to get one back on the schedule pretty soon. Otherwise, it's gonna just linger.
yeah. So there's a 100K race coming up a bit later in the year, which will be good. But I think, yeah, I kind of rushed into it pretty quickly. Like, I don't have that much trail experience, to be honest. I'd done like one trail race prior, and yeah, then I jumped into this one, and I don't know, I just felt like my confidence wasn't really quite there. But yeah, it was a weird experience, but a good learning process regardless.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of trail experience either. This 50 miler in a couple of weeks is going to be quite interesting. I just kind of like was like, I'm going to dive straight in and learn all the lessons the hard way, and go from there.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's a
What
weird sport. Like, I feel like you can easily just get carried away and just sign up for the next like furthest distance, and then next thing you know, you've signed up for a 100 mile like I had within 6 months. But,
For sure, for sure.
yeah.
I recently I did the similar thing with a triathlon recently. I'd always wanted to do one, and I did an Olympic try, and so that's what is it? It's like a K swim, 40K bike ride, and 10K run. And I had never really cycled before. Like, I know how to ride a bike, but like I've never been a cyclist or anything like that. And I rented a bike like 2 weeks before the race and just like took it for a few rides, and
Yeah.
and then went into the race. And I did the swim, everything was okay. I did the ride, everything was okay. And I was like riding in from the ride, and I felt like really strong. And this is where just like experience comes in, of like what we were talking about. I'm like riding in, and then I'm like, man, it's 10Ks. Like, I got this in the bag. Like, this is gonna be so easy. I'll just jump off this bike and ride and run. And like, I get off the bike, and my legs just like don't work anymore. And I'm not saying like that to exaggerate. Like, they like fully like cramped up on the bike, but I didn't notice because I was just like sitting there. And like, as soon as I started to run, I like couldn't move properly. It was like I had like wooden legs, and I was like trying to just like scuffle along. And it was like honestly the hardest 10Ks I've ever ran. Like, it was like almost like embarrassing how bad it was, because I just like didn't train that transition. And even the funniest part was, like, as I was pulling in on my bike, I was still 100% confident that I was going to get off and slam this run. And as soon as I just like stepped off my bike, everything just like changed. And like, it's one of those things where like when you don't have experience, you don't see those things coming, like in that sense, or whatever it's going to be, like, 30-40 miles into a trail run or whatever happens, like without experience, you just can't anticipate those things.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. I was listening to the Graduate Theory podcast you did with
Yeah.
James, and you mentioned like you gave a bit of advice at the end, being if you could do two things, it would be sort of run and read every day. So
Yeah.
from from a practical perspective, how does that carry over in your, like, how does the running carry over in your work life? Would you
Yeah, I
say?
think I don't want to like parrot too much of like the human lab kind of stuff, but I kind of have to, because it's kind of like how I live my life in that sense. But it's really like just from like a biological perspective, when you think about like what each of these things do, like in that sense, like, running has a certain characteristic in the sense that as you're like, especially if you're running outdoors, one, you're getting outside every day. So that's, going to make a big difference, getting out in the sun, all these kind of things in terms of just your general mental state. But also as you run through space, your eyes like move left and right, and it actually like really relaxes you in that sense. So that's why I also say running, and there's no barrier to entry. You don't need to like sign up to a gym and swim in a pool. You don't need a bike. Like, anyone can run. And so that's why I would choose running. And then reading, I mean, it's just one of those things. Like, once you start reading, it's just so fundamental in terms of just your education and the sort of mentors that you get to sort of surround yourself with. I think one sort of underrated thing other than reading is like definitely podcasts. Like, you almost feel like your mentors, like you can listen to all these like interviews in real time of like people that you like really look up to, and like get advice off them directly, even like it's almost like they're talking to you in that sense, which is kind of can be underrated. But I think just in the running side of things, it's just like the things that I try to do these days is just like really try to like, I guess you'd say like biologically optimize my day so that I can be most productive. And like what you were saying about you at work and like going for a run so you're not anxious at work and like all these kind of things. Like there's so many little like I hate the word hack, but there's so many, I'd use the word optimizations that you can just do in your day to make yourself just a better person to be around. In that sense, like a lot of like the moods or mindsets or things that you get into have a result of like the last, like how long it's been since you last moved, how long it's been since you've last been outside, how long, like when you last ate sugar, like all these things. But because you're just blindly going through your day, you don't realize what impact they're having on you. And then that's impacting the way you're treating your team members, your girlfriend, like all these kind of things. And so the reason I say running and reading is I feel like you learn all these things through those sort of like two avenues as you start to like climb that ladder in that sense.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think when we talk about reading, this might be deviating from the theme of the podcast, but what are some of, just because I'm personally curious, what are some of the most influential sort of books that have shaped you, or anything, any that just come to mind? Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you guys talk about books much on the podcast, but like if you guys haven't read Born to Run, like I mean, Born to Run is one of the greatest books like ever written, and it's about running. So highly recommend reading that. And you know, salient to the podcast in that sense. Born to Run really changed my perspective on running, just in the sense of like understanding that how much humans were built for running. Like we're like the only animals that can run long distance. Like the way that our lungs work, we're the only animals that can breathe independently of our limbs moving. So like the reason that other animals run out of breath is every time they sort of like move their front feet forward and then pull it back, like a horse kind of like gallops, it's taking a breath. So the faster it runs, the faster it's breathing, essentially.
Wow.
Humans aren't like that. So we can actually regulate our breath and run longer. Our breath doesn't have to, like, we don't take a breath every time we like, you know, take a step or whatever. That's how basically every other animal works, and why we can sort of out endure them and stuff like that. And so like when you like read that book, you're like, oh, because like, you know, I don't know, you guys probably hear this a lot, but like everybody thinks like running's bad for you, like it's bad for your knees and it's bad for your feet,
joints.
and like
I get that one all the time.
Yeah, like all this bullshit.
You're gonna wear your
and,
joints
like,
out.
Oh, I hate it so much. Like in that sense, like compared to our like ancestors, we are so like sedentary. Like in that sense, like, you know, even if you're running 10Ks a day, you're like doing nothing compared to like what our ancestors had to do on a daily basis just to like eat and survive and like all these kind of things. Like, you know, 10,000 steps is just like what they'd have to do to get like berries in the morning or something like that. You know, it's like a
Yeah.
So like when when that like puts it into perspective, that book really influenced me. And then without getting too much into books, one other one is The War of Art.
Oh yeah.
The reason I like The War of Art is it's just like about resistance. I think it's a good one in terms of running as well, because The War of Art is just about battling that voice in your head that's constantly like, yeah, man, you don't need to run. You got COVID. Like, you don't need to worry about that. You got a running nose. You got like a sore toe. Like, you know, all those things. And like you'll actually find, like, it doesn't matter whether it's like a creative pursuit, a physical pursuit, whatever it is. The more trained you are, the more fit you are, the closer you get to the race, the more scared you become, which doesn't make any sense. Like your resistance actually grows the better you get, which is like the most confusing part about training in that sense. Like, you know, even say in a startup, my resistance is higher now than when I had no team members, no money, and no anything. Like in that sense, it's weird. It grows sort of with, I guess, like with what you have to lose in that sense, in that way. So they would be two books. So the what did I say? Born to Run and The War of Art.
That's interesting. Born to Run. Yeah, I can resonate with that. Like you think about, why do I feel so much joy at the end of a run? Like there's got to be some underlying reason that you do, and it doesn't normally correlate to sort of how we live at the moment. but it
But
does.
there's no other exercise that does that, right? Like
Mm.
I'm training like on the bike at the moment. I'm swimming. I go to the gym. You don't get the same thing as what you get after a run.
Interesting. Even
Yeah.
on the like a hard bike session or
No,
no?
no.
Mm.
Okay.
I don't think so. Do you think so, Dom? Do you ride at all?
It's a different sort of like pleasure though. Like after a hard swim, you feel really relaxed and like
Yep.
lethargic, kind of like it feels good though. Like it feels like you've just had a massage sort of feeling. Whereas after a run though, you feel like uplifted and like ready to go almost. I don't know. It's a weird feeling. Yeah.
The euphoria is just like running has like a unique euphoria in that sense. Like I definitely feel good after the others. Like exercise always gives me endorphins and like, whatever, but running, it's unique in the sense at the end. I don't know what it is. I mean, your heart rate gets higher and different things like that. I don't know. It's hard to say.
It's hard to describe sometimes. Do you think there's a correlation between, I think sometimes for me at least, I've found there's more joy depending on the session or depending on how hard you've pushed yourself, or I don't know, sometimes the way you analyze how you're tracking against even the goal of running. Like sometimes there's many things that sort of come together, like if your paces are going well, for example. So that's interesting. Do you find that at all, Robbie? Like, do you
Yeah, I
pay
mean, like the
much?
gamification definitely plays in. Like, you're
Yeah.
doubling down on dopamine in that sense. Like you get a dopamine from a good run, and then your watch goes beep beep beep. You got a PR, and your like threshold just went up, and you're like, yeah, like you know what I mean? Like
Yeah, it is.
it's just double dopamine doses that are exploding, and Garmin's worked out how to gamify that, and every run that I go on, it tells me what my like baseline performance is, and like if it's lower than yesterday, I'm like disappointed and shit. Like it doesn't, it doesn't even mean anything in the grand scheme of things.
But it does.
Yeah.
It feels like it. Oh dear. Yeah, but that's interesting. I think I did do a bit of stalking on your Instagram, but
Cool.
what is your, so you're into like breath work as well?
Yeah.
So what's the rationale behind that? Like I've never investigated that personally.
Okay, cool. So breathwork I actually haven't been doing as much as what I used to do. I just understand it in a little bit more depth now. I have done a fair bit of like free diving as well, which has been interesting, like just experimenting with like apnea, like diving deep without using your breath and stuff like that. It definitely increases your like lung capacity and whatever. The like Wim Hof style breathing is quite famous these days. I understand it. I used to kind of do it every day, but now I understand it differently to what I understood it before. And sort of we could tie this back to what I was saying about like energy imbalances between anxiety and depression. So if you're going to do this like breathwork Tumo style breathing, you probably want to do it on the days where you're a little bit more like depressed or down, because it's gonna like ramp up your nervous system and activate like your parasympathetic state and whatever. So if you're feeling like you need a little bit of juice, like Wim Hof breathing can elevate your state. But if you're feeling anxious, probably not a great strategy. Probably, better off meditating or just sitting there or going for like a casual run or something like that. So like just depending on like what your body needs. I definitely don't do it as much as I used to. I think like to a good segue there is just like thinking about what I was saying before in terms of like biologically optimizing your day is kind of like what I think about a lot. Like realizing to not drink coffee until like sort of like an hour and a half to 2 hours after waking has been like a big change for me.
Oh, tell me
don't
about
get
that.
you don't get the coffee crash. And so what happens is like if you when you wake up in the morning, your body's like using up the rest. So as throughout the day, you build up what's called like adenosine, and that's what makes you feel sleepy in the afternoon. And caffeine masks adenosine. When you wake up in the morning, you're getting rid of the rest of your adenosine from the day before. And you usually get like a cortisol spike that actually clears out that adenosine from the day before. But if you wake up in the morning and you have coffee straight away, you don't get that cortisol spike and you keep that adenosine left over from the night before. And then you like grab that and fast forward it to later in the day, so your crash is like almost worse in that sense. Whereas if you find if you wait an hour and a half, you don't get like a 3:30itis kind of situation. But I mean, like, look, getting up and waiting an hour and a half for your coffee's hard. Like, it's not an easy thing to do. But like I'm a bit of a coffee nut, so I'll probably stay on this topic because you asked about it for a second.
Yeah, no,
but,
I'm curious. First thing I do, sorry to interrupt you, is put
No,
on
you're
the
right.
coffee machine as soon as I get up, and I
Yeah.
experience that exact crash at 3
Yeah.
o'clock every
So
day.
what I mean, I'm literally just going to be parroting some Huberman Lab stuff here, so this like
Please.
isn't my stuff, but I'll share it. It's worked for me. So first and foremost, like you want to get up and you want to get outside straight away. Like that's gonna what's called phase advancing. So you want to like the reason you want to phase advance is like you want to wake your body up faster so that you feel like going to sleep earlier. If you go to sleep earlier, you wake up earlier, et cetera, et cetera. You know, your life goes better that way. Once you get up, go out and exercise. It's the best way to get your body like moving and you know and whatnot. But something I enjoy doing is I have like an ice bath at my house, like one of those sort of like meat freezer things, which is obviously good for recovery. But this is what's interesting with coffee. A lot of people think that coffee gives you dopamine, but it doesn't. What coffee actually does is it actually it upregulates like your dopamine receptors. So it makes whenever you receive a bout of dopamine, it feels better when you've had coffee. So if you have a coffee and go for a run, the dopamine that you get from the run will feel better. Like in that sense, coffee doesn't actually give you dopamine. It sort of like magnifies the how you receive the dopamine, I guess is probably a better way to describe it. But ice baths are like a really long-tailed dopamine explosion, so you get a lot of dopamine for a really long time. So I like to like have like get up, do that hour and a half run or workout in the morning, have my coffee, like I've earned it, done my workout, and then get in the ice bath. So it's like, you know, the receptors are firing and then just like dopamine explosion. So then I can like start my day in like a really good state in that sense. And, you know, if you've had a run, a coffee and an ice bath in the morning, you're a happy person. Like I guarantee you, like in that sense, you're a good person to be around.
That's very interesting. And I think I'm going to have to edit my morning schedule for sure.
I'd highly recommend it.
Yeah, but one thing I worry about is like I've gotten so used to having coffee and running. Like, would it impact my workout in any way from a performance?
Probably.
Yeah.
Like the first few days would feel sluggish, and you'd probably be more sad, and you know, you'd have to you have to fight through it for sure.
Yeah,
I feel like it's really interesting, like how you say it enhances the dopamine effect, because I feel like when you've had a coffee, your perceived like rate of exertion when you're running feels so much less, and it just feels so much easier. So I guess that kind of ties in with that, which is
for sure
kind of like a good way to explain it. Because when I've had a coffee and I'm doing a workout, it feels so much easier. Even if like I'm running a pace, if I was doing it without a coffee, it'd feel like this sucks, and I don't know, it feels like the negative thoughts are creeping in a lot earlier almost. But yeah, that's really cool. I never thought of it like that.
Yeah, and like dopamine just makes everything feel better, right? Like, well, that's not technically true. Like, dopamine is a molecule of more. Like, it just wants you to. It's not actually the like pleasure. It's more. Like a good way to think about dopamine is like, you know, when you feel like a piece of chocolate, as soon as you eat it, you don't go, oh yes, I've had chocolate. Dopamine makes you go 2 blocks, 3 blocks, 4 blocks, 5 blocks until you like eat the whole block or whatever. But it can also work like 1 mile, 2 mile, 3 mile, 4 miles. You're like, you want to run, then you start running and you want to run more and all that kind of stuff. So as long as it's channeled in the right direction, it can have that effect that you were just sort of talking about.
Yeah.
Interesting. No, very interesting. And adjustments might need to be made. I'll have to do like sort of add to the, I don't know if I could do it definitely in a testing phase where you're doing a max test or something, but maybe next week experiment with something like that. But
look, you know, back to what we were saying, like to do a circle loop, back to like talking about Courtney Dauwalter and what's her name, and you know, test it. If it works for you, do it. If it doesn't, don't. Like I'm one of those sort of people that like I really love the science behind why things work, like biologically. Like I enjoy that sort of perspective, and I'll always try those things out because they just like conceptually make sense to me. But you know, if it doesn't work for you, like it doesn't really like I always say, like don't do it. Like in that sense, like you know yourself best, and whatever's going to get you to train at your highest capacity, just do that. But I'm always one that like I'll run an experiment for a week, like what you were saying, and then be like, nah, that Robby guy's off his head. I'm not doing that.
Yeah, I'll have to report back and message you in this app as well. But so what? I'm just maybe again going maybe on a tangent, but I'm curious anyway. Like, what are some of the work context? Because obviously you're doing a lot of experimenting. What I guess maybe for focus or I don't know. What have you optimized in that actual 8 hour whatever sort of hours you're working?
Yeah. So I went through my training regime, and the first thing people would obviously say to me a lot is like, how do you get the time to do all of that stuff? Like when you're running a startup, and, I've got a team of 10 people, we've raised venture capital, we're taking on enormous businesses and whatnot. And it takes up a lot of time in that sense, but there's a lot of sacrifices that have had to be made to be able to do that. Like, for example, I don't really drink. I don't often like go out at night and these things. Like I literally work and work out. That's like my entire existence in that sense. But in terms of like productivity, back to what we were sort of just literally talking about in terms of like the biologically optimizing your day. So like the way I've set up my day is perfectly so I can work and exercise in a certain capacity. So like I wake up at about 5:30 every day, and I do that thing that I just told you about through to the ice bath. One interesting thing about just like being able to focus, especially if you do like computer work, is you have these sort of ultradian cycles, which your body can sort of focus for about 90 minutes before you're sort of like falling off the tracks, and you're not really being that useful anymore. I sort of have this phone reminder on my phone. Elon Musk posted it the other day. It's like this guy who's like looks disheveled, and then it's like Jesus Christ, and they're like talking, and the disheveled guy's like, am I being tested again? Is this one of your hardest battles? And then Jesus is like, you literally just need to put your phone down and go outside. And I think I think there's like so much truth to that. Like I try to just shift my day up every 90 minutes sort of thing. So like in the morning, something to think about in terms of just like your relationships and like all these sort of things. There's like a funny story of Winston Churchill where like someone said, how did you stay in your marriage so long? And he said, like, me and my wife didn't speak before midday. I'm not recommending that at all, but like in the morning, the first 8 hours of your day, you've got more dopamine in your system and also more like neuroepinephrine. So like you're like a lot more like edgy and like ready to go. Like it's not like a state where you probably want to have like your most deep and meaningful conversations and, sit down and reflect on your life. Like that's not really what your sort of like morning composure is usually for. You like the types of work that are best for people in the morning is like that logic based work. So, I need to punch out an email. I need to write a document. I need to do a spreadsheet, not really creative, like highly like logic based work. So I try to like set my mornings up where it's mainly just me. Like I'm not really good at workshopping in the morning or being creative or whatever it is. It's like, otherwise I'm sort of like overbearing. Like in the morning, I'm very like, I would call it like intense. And that's like, most of us are that way. That's why you're a little bit, like you're a little bit more edgy or shittier in the morning. And, even if you're sick, you'll notice this more. In the morning, you feel sicker, but later in the day, you always feel like a little bit better. Like, and that's because in the second half of your day, it's very like serotonin driven. So you're much more like loving, happy, kind of like relaxed person in sort of, you can sort of break your day up into like three quadrants. The first 8 hours, second 8 hours, sleep, essentially. So first 8 hours is like drive and just like an intensity, and the second 8 hours is kind of like love and sort of like creativity and that serotonin based sort of environment. So in the second half of my day, I try to workshop with my team, work on design, like do all of that kind of stuff. So that's kind of like I try to optimize my day in those two sort of circumstances, and it also helps me manage relationships better in that sense. But in terms of productivity, I find that I do like I really believe that like the body sets the mind, and so like if I'm trying to sit down for a bout of work, I'll often do exercise as part of my work session. So I'll go for a run or do a little kettlebell session in my room. Or I always do a little bit of physical exercise before I sit down at my computer to work, just to get my like brain moving, and all those kind of things. And I really think it works. And I don't do any of my thinking at my desk. I do all executing, and I think on my runs and my rides and all that sort of stuff. And then when I'm at my computer, that's when I'm working. I don't sit at my computer and just like sit there for the sake of it. And I found it's better. Like I used to do a lot more like micromanaging. I'd kind of just be like sitting around like, oh, like, I feel like I need to be busy. I'll call one of my team members and ask them what they're doing or like something like that. Like, but I don't do that anymore because I don't like have the time to do it, but it's made me a better leader and people enjoy working with me better as a result of that. One other thing, productivity wise, that's really made a big difference in my life, and not everybody has this luxury, but because I work from home, I'm able to have like a non-sleep deep rest in the middle of the day. So I'll often have like a 20-minute kind of non-sleep deep rest is essentially like a new age nap in that sense. And I just find it sort of like allows me to start my day again. Like I wake up, exercise, do a big bout of work, get to like have a nap, and then wake up, exercise, do a big bout of work, exercise. And so it's almost like you get 2 days in one, sort of like mixed together. But yeah, so that's kind of like how my days are. Pretty much 7 days a week. I do the same thing pretty much every single day, day in, day out. And
Interesting.
yeah,
You no traditional day where you just completely switch off, or do you? How does that work?
I mean, there's days where it just like I don't usually choose a rest day. I kind of like just go off how my body's feeling. But I mean, like I have such an easy life. I know it might sound weird, but compared to most people, like I am a founder of a startup that I wanted to create, right? So like, and then like investors invested, in our idea. So that's like the most fulfilling thing in the world for investors. It's like people saying like, I believe in you, like, and I get to wake up every day and do what I love. I don't have to commute anywhere. So like, I don't really ever get sick. I'm not like on public transport or in offices or like anything like that. I like, I have a great relationship with my girlfriend. I get along with my team really, really well. Like I eat healthy and like, I train and sit down for large amounts of the day. I go to bed at like 9 p.m. every night. And it's not that often that my body is like completely like done. But, there definitely are days where like my body's like, no. But I would say like, 9 times out of 10, that's pretty much what my day would look like. If anything, I'm just toning the exercise down. Like instead of going for a run, I'll go for a walk or like, like just things like that. But the structure is pretty much the same.
Right. Okay. I might just take the opportunity to ask about like how did you go from, I guess, from a traditional sort of path, which, if I'm correct, you used to be in sort of the banking industry.
Yep.
What made you take a turn, obviously for the better from what you're describing, how your life's going and obviously your general well-being? Like what made you go in that direction?
Yeah, I mean, it was literally the opposite life. Like when I was a banker, we used to say it's a job, it's a life, it's not a job, it's a lifestyle. Like we would go to lunches and drink every single day, basically at work, and like all these kind of things. So, like literally, like the polar opposite lifestyle. Nothing really. I never really wanted to like start a business or start a startup or anything like that. My parents had a small business when I was young, and I basically like grew up in the factory, and like I basically never wanted. I wasn't like one of those entrepreneurs that like sold t-shirts and like had a little business when I was young or whatever. Like I like literally my whole childhood was work. Like we would have to go to the factory and unpack stuff, drive forklifts around, like clean the factory 24/7. That's all we did, like with my family. And so I went to uni and got into the bank because I didn't want to do that. And one of my friends in the bank started an advisory firm and just encouraged me to join it with him. And I sort of left the bank on a whim and went and did that. And then that was kind of my first introduction to tech. Like I didn't, growing up in Australia, I don't know about you guys, but like being an entrepreneur and like building startups and stuff like that, tech startups and it's not really like a thing that like people do or talk about, or they might these days, but like when I was growing up, like I didn't have heaps of friends who built apps and raised venture capital and like all these kind of things that you have in America. So I didn't know what that was. And then, yeah, like through that advisory sort of startup that we created, like I started working alongside founders that like were building software and tech and like all those kind of things. And I just like fell in love with it because it's just so interesting. And like, it's, you know, you just get to build things and create products that like millions of people use every single day, and thinking through those problems is just like super interesting. And yeah, haven't really been able to go back from that. I think it's like one of those things where it's in your blood. Like, you know, even though you might want to run away from what your parents do or like what you did when you were growing up, it always like catches up to you. And you're like, you wake up one day when you're like in your late 20s and you're like, oh, I'm exactly like my parents. That's right.
Yeah. But you sort of deviated thinking I never want to do that, and now you're
it's like you just go all the way around the long way, and then you're like, oh shit, I could have just walked straight here. Like in that sense. But, you know, so you have to go through that journey.
So what did you feel was not disappointing, but what did you dislike about traditional, that sort of banking role? Was it the lack of creativity?
I wouldn't say I disliked it. I actually loved my job. It was fantastic, and you know, it taught me everything I know now. The only downside was like health definitely wasn't a priority. But even like for me and like the people that you surround yourself with like weren't overly healthy. Like it was classic like glory day banking culture where you just go out drinking into lunches. And I actually worked in the private bank, so our job was to just like smooze and booze like wealthy individuals in that sort of sense. And so it was so much fun. Like I don't necessarily have a problem with the you know, 9 to 5 lifestyle. Like I pretty much work 9 to 5. Like in that sense, like I get up in the morning and train, and then I work 9 to 5. And then like the only thing I'm happy to not do is not commute, because like people spend, you know, anywhere between an hour and a half and 3 hours commuting every day. And like, that's kind of the time I used to exercise. And that's like really valuable time that you kind of just can waste in commuting. So, but other than that, like, I mean, I don't have a problem with the sort of more traditional lifestyle.
I guess a better question then would be, what did you actually learn? What did you take? What are the key things you took away from that sort of, not lifestyle, but that job essentially? Because you mentioned, I mean, there's a selling aspect, of course, to that. So so what did you take away?
I think like relationship management was definitely the most important, like in that sense. And then just also understanding that like wealthy individuals are just like us. Like they're no different to you. They have the same problems as you. They wake up in the morning and go running every day. They like, you know, it's kind of like they're no different, and you just need to act like a normal person around them. But it really helped me in raising capital for the startup that I'm working at now. Like I had those relationships and networks and whatever. And like, instead of trying to get people to put money into the bank, I was just getting people to put money into my startup in that sense. And like just maintaining those relationships with the investors that we have, that skill set definitely did play through. But I think relationship management is just such a cool skill to have in that sense, because it makes you like not a salesperson. Like you're like, I wouldn't even say I'm an insanely good salesperson. I'm just good at building relationships quickly, like in that sense, like where people want to like come on the journey and participate and like all those things. It's not really like a transaction in that sort of like function.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think so. My background's a little bit, so I started off in sales, and I've sort of always been in that sort of role. And the more I sort of learn and experience, the more you realize, like you said, it's about relationships largely. Like, and there's no when you get into sales, or at least in my experience, you always are looking for the tactics and the you know, the things that are going to, you know, get the sale over the line and all that sort of stuff. But when you kind of just take a step back and just try and understand the person, it's more of a simple way to approach it, and definitely more, I guess the more genuine you are as well. It's just things that are, like, for example, I've learned.
I have heaps of friends that sort of say to me, like, can you teach me sales or like how you do
Yeah.
deals or whatever? And it's like, it's kind of like trying to teach you how to be me. Like it's
Mm.
not I can't teach you like that because like there's no skill. I couldn't even write it in a book as to what I'm doing. I'm just like being myself, like in terms of what you're saying. Like, I'll jump on a call with an investor and I'm supposed to be pitching my startup and we might talk about running for 45 minutes. Like I might be like, oh, I saw your LinkedIn post. You did the Boston Marathon, and then I'll ask them about their training schedule, and like, we'll talk for like 57 minutes about running, and then at the last 3 minutes, they're like, oh yeah, how much did you need for your startup again? And then you say, and they're like, okay, cool, yeah, I'm in. Like, it's like people don't realize that everyone knows why they're on the call. You don't need to like.
Yeah.
I think people can get too attached to like the clothes or like it is important to be disciplined with that stuff, but I think just really finding common ground with people and like just being good at having a conversation is like so undervalued.
Yeah, and that's important. That's true. Like, for example, even just doing the podcast, I've noticed my work has gotten better because I'm getting a little bit better at having conversations with people and sort of being a little bit more not so focused on saying specific words, or you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
getting caught up in the tactics, just having conversations. So that's
Don't underestimate like what you have in your head. Like somebody said this to me as I used to date a writer, and I was asking her like, when I'm reading all these books, I'm like highlighting everything and I'm writing everything down. Like, how do I like remember what I need to say? And I often like prepare for podcasts and calls and stuff, but I just like never use my notes, in that sense. But like, she was like, you'll remember when it's important. Like in that sense, you'll find when you're talking in a podcast, you'll just say something and you're like, I've never said that before, but that's genius. Like, you know what I mean? And it's like, but and you say it, but the, Ido Portal, who's like a movement specialist, said this thing and it's just like sat in my mind. Forgetting is not the same as never knowing in that sense. So just because you forget something doesn't really matter because next time it gets brought up, it'll all come back and you'll have the context. Like forgetting like I think people worry about it too much or like you need to say the perfect thing, but I think you sort of like undervalue yourself. It's like if you use like a marathon as an analogy, you're like trying to figure out exactly like how you're going to be feeling and like what cadence you're going to be doing and stuff at like the 36th mile in a marathon, the 36th kilometer in a marathon. Sorry, I'm trying to like talk to you guys in Ks, but I've been living in America for too long and I've almost converted it over to miles.
Yeah.
But you're at the 36th kilometer and you're trying to plan out that kilometer, but like you're just better off going off feel when you get there. Like in that sense, you have no idea what's going to be happening at that stage of the race. And I think like conversations are the same, but you've just got to have that confidence to rely on yourself to know what to do in that moment.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy. Like you've really thought about your life and how everything comes together. I really liked your examples of how you break your life up into the thirds of 8 hours. But I guess like, have you thought much about nutrition as well and how you time your eating or what you eat and how that kind of ties in with your running as well?
Yeah, this is a fascinating one because I think about you all the time with this one, Dom, actually. I have a distinct memory of having a conversation with you about how you like. I remember we were like having a conversation about like oat milk and full cream milk at that pub. Do you remember that?
Yeah, got a bit out of hand.
Yeah, I actually, I actually remember this conversation, and like, I, uh, I think about you a lot in this example. I think nutrition and in that pub altercation, I was wrong. But I think about nutrition in the sense of like I think it's important for you to think about like what type of car are you? Like, are you a Prius? Are you like a Ferrari? Like, if you're a Prius, you only need to fill up your tank like once a week. Like, you could probably like have some salad or something. Like, it's okay. You probably sit behind your desk most of the time. You might go out for like a couple of walks, like whatever. Dom's like a Ferrari, right? Like, you can pour fucking full cream milk in there. You can pour hamburgers. You can pour KFC. He's gonna burn it up. It's like you think about his stomach is like a furnace. Like the furnace is like burning so hot. Like, actually a good example is like, have you guys ever been in front of like a wood fire? And like if it's like low and you chuck a big log in there, it just puts it out, right? But like if it's full on flaming and it's like going crazy and it's heaps hot and shit, you throw a log in there, it just like eats it up. Like Dom's like metabolism's like that, like full on crazy fire. Like in that sense, you just throw shit in there, it just burns up. Like in that sense, I actually really believe that in terms of nutrition. I think people can get a little bit too attached to what you should eat. I think it depends on your body composition. Like, and how much training you do. Like one of my favorite athletes, Ross Edgley. I don't know do you guys know who Ross Edgley is?
Yeah, he like did the big swim or something. From England to France.
No, he did more than that. He swam around the whole of England. So it was like he swam 12 hours a day for 6 months straight, like every single day. It was something ridiculous. It was like 2,500 miles or something of swimming. Anyway, when you look at how Ross Edgley trains and what he eats, he'll go like Ross Edgley regularly goes for like 25-kilometer swims. Like that's like his Tuesday exercise. Like and like he'll
swims 25.
Yeah. and you'll just see him. He has like a paddle board and it has like a 4-kilo brownie like on the paddleboard. He just like comes up from his swim and he's just like scooping it into his mouth. Like I think of those kind of people, like, you have all these like warriors that are like, you should eat this and blood glucose that. And like these people's bodies are just like, just fucking give me something. Like it doesn't matter. Like, I have these times sometimes where I haven't eaten enough and then I just feel like a whole pizza and I eat a whole pizza and the next day I feel amazing. Like my body just, it needs, like, I'm just so depleted. I just need a huge log in my fire. Like in that sense, is probably a good way to think about it. But to answer your question directly without going into too many metaphors and all those kind of things, my diet's pretty good. Like, I mean, I'm not like ridiculous about it, but I eat pretty clean. Like, I mean, I have a smoothie every morning. My girlfriend basically calls it like a concrete smoothie. It's like 2 bananas and avocado, a bunch of blueberries, some strawberries, protein powder. It's like you almost have to like cut it up with a knife and fork by the time it's like blended up and stuff. But it's like a perfect concoction after I've like trained. Like, you've got like some good fats in there and all that kind of stuff. I just eat like a lot of like, I enjoy like salmon and chicken and a lot of veggies and potatoes and stuff. Like I cook a lot. Like I basically cook every single meal I eat personally, but it's literally like, a classic dinner you'd have at home, like some chicken, some veggies and, some potatoes. But my new favorite thing with cooking is my air fryer. I'm like obsessed with it. Like I cook like literally everything in it. I don't know why I didn't buy one earlier. Have you got an air fryer, Dom?
No, I think Mum and Dad just got one. So
man, seriously, like you can cook you can just get like a full chicken breast and just put it in there for like 20 minutes and it's perfect, or like a steak or whatever you want, and you don't even have to stand there and cook it. It's like a microwave frying pan. It's like the greatest thing in the world. But yeah, so like nutrition wise, compared to the average person, I eat well. But I'm not obsessed. Like, I'll eat a pizza here and there and like all those kind of things. And I don't tease people about drinking full cream milk anymore like I used to when I attacked you at the pub.
Wait, for context, what happened in the altercation?
I think I was talking about oat milk. And then Dom was like saying that he hasn't transitioned to oat milk yet. And I was like dumbfounded that he hadn't. And I had this like story that it was just ridiculous that people still drank full cream milk in that sense. But I was just being like a Instagram judgmental wanker, I guess, in that sense. And I definitely... What's that?
There's a few people on each side of the argument at the time though. So yeah, it got like interesting. It was
that was actually the day that I stopped drinking. And I haven't drank since that night.
Yeah, wow.
How long ago was that?
Almost 2 years ago, I think. Maybe like a year and a half, 2 years.
Wow.
Because I've been in America for a year, so it was well before that. I was in Sydney. No, because Joey, one of Scott's friends, said something to me. Uh, he said that he goes, you know how like when you're training for something, you stop drinking.
Yeah.
Like, say you're training for like a marathon or like you're doing something. He's like, my life is a triathlon. And then Scott said something to him and Scott was like, yeah, but like, what about all the good times you've had drinking and all that sort of stuff? And Joey was like, yeah, like I have had good times. I had good times at uni as well, but I left uni. And I was like, fuck, that actually makes so much sense. um,
Wow.
and yeah, I just stopped and like it's just my life's been so much better off the back of that. Like I had so much fun drinking when I was younger, but like it just doesn't add any value to my life at this age.
Yeah.
I'm very curious about that because, I mean, for my own reasons, given I haven't drank for over 7 months now, and that's like pretty.
Congrats.
Yeah, which is huge for me, and sort of it was getting in the way of life, I would say. But how's your experience been, not drinking for 2 years? Like, I guess
When
the
I say not
initial.
drinking for 2 years, like I've had like one whiskey with an investor when we've raised capital or something like
Sure,
that,
sure.
but like not been like drunk in that sense or like drinking on a Friday night or something like that. Like, very, very celebratory. It's not like I haven't sipped alcohol in 2 years. I'm not like someone trying to get
Sure.
Alcoholics Anonymous and jump off, but like I haven't been a drinker for 2 years in that sense. But yeah.
And I guess what was your experience before that? Just like sort of the standard drinking, which is with friends and stuff like that. So you would just party a little bit.
Yeah. Like I was a huge party animal when I was younger. Like went to King's Cross every weekend and like all those kind of
Okay.
things, and grew up drinking heaps. Like I would call myself a pretty heavy drinker. Like I wouldn't drink during the week, but I drink every weekend. Like in that sense. So yeah.
And stopping. What is that? What have you learned from that? Would you say?
Well, like there was one thing as well. Like starting a startup, there's something pretty special about it, right? Like these people like believe in you and they give you their hard-earned cash so that you can go and chase your dream, like in that sense. And I felt this like heavy responsibility. And there was one night where just before that night where we were all at the pub with Dom and stuff like that, and there was one night where I got really drunk, and like for the next few days it was like one of the first times where I felt like I couldn't actually pull off this mission. Like drinking actually puts you into a more depressed state, and like it's I doubted myself and I was like worried for a few days and anxious and nervous and like all these kind of things. And I just felt like I owed it to my investors and like my team to be the type of person that could build such a business. And I think entrepreneurs have to be athletes. Like it's literally like your chances of success are so low that like you have to operate at like that serious of a level that you almost have to operate at like an Olympian capacity in terms of like what you're doing. And so it was just kind of like I was like thinking to myself, I'm like, I've got the opportunity of a lifetime. I've got everything I ever wanted. Like I don't need to drink. It's not like why would I do that? Like in that sense. And it's been really interesting. Like there's not a single person in our company that drinks regularly. Drinking's not a part of our company culture where we have like Friday drinks or anything like that. I didn't hire anyone based on that capacity. It just kind of happened. But one of my life philosophies that I guess that you guys would kind of appreciate is like, I think the reason that it's important to be like physically and mentally fit, and drinking sort of plays into this, is kind of like you sort of owe it to the people that you love, lead, and sort of like work for. Like in the sense that like when people see you training hard, or like, you're coming home every day and you're walking in, putting on your running shoes and leaving, like people are watching you do that and they're watching you run these races and like all these kind of things. And like, you have an influence on them whether you like it or not. Like one of my team members was saying like you can kind of imagine based on the stuff I'm talking about, every single team meeting we have, I'm asking them about their exercise, what they're doing and all these kind of things. And one of my team members was like, yeah, I was about to buy a bag of chocolates the other day and like Robbie was in my head and I was like, nah, I'm going to like leave it. Like, the dopamine just getting ahead of me and stuff like that. Like you have that influence on people even when you're just kind of like living your life. But like the alternative is you can be the person who brings the chocolate into the house or brings the beers home and whatever. And like I'm not a sociopath. If someone brings a bag of M&Ms home, I'm going to eat them, right? Like, it's like one of those things, but it's like, you want to, for the people that you love and the people that you are surrounded by, you want to be that type of person that's always encouraging people to kind of, be better for themselves. And like, when your energy's higher, you think clearer and you're just a better person all around. And like, you have employers who are paying you, you owe it to them to be good at your job and to be thinking clearly and to be fucking nailing it. And like, I think all these kind of things are important. And like, people work for me, are influenced by me, are learning from me, rely on me for their paychecks and like all those kind of things. And I want them to have confidence that I'm the type of person that can deliver that, like, in that sense. And so I think that's like, just to sort of circle that sort of like drinking thing, I think that's where that does need to like tie back, is to like really thinking about who depends on you and what influence whatever you're doing, whether it's running every day or whatever it is having on everyone around you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, funny. Sorry, Dom, you were going to say something?
Oh, it just kind of like reminds me of James Clear's Atomic Habits, where he's just talking about environments, and you have to put yourself in an environment where you're not going to be tempted by stuff like that. Like, I think that everyone knows like that stuff's not good for them, but if you put it in their face or surround them with it, they're going to go for it. But yeah,
of course, like when I go out with people to a bar or something, I absolutely want a beer, right? Like, it's not like, I don't want it. And there's like, I'm this like person who just walks around like with broccoli sticks in my bag, and like, I'm so happy about that. You know what I mean?
Broccoli sticks. Yeah, it's such a, what I found at least, it is like you're saying, Robbie, such a conditioned response when you walk into those environments, and it's almost like, depending on it's almost like it's expected that you would drink almost.
But not only that, I enjoy it. I like drinking a beer is great, and it feels
I love
good.
it too.
It's not like it's not just the peer pressure that everyone's making me feel like I have to drink. That's not even the worst part. Like, I like
good.
how
it's
it
nice.
feels when I have a beer. Like, in that sense, it's like, I like how chocolate tastes. It's not just people judging me. I actually enjoy it, which is worse. Like, in that sense.
So you have to almost go through that internal battle of craving, or I don't know. That's what it is, yeah. Well, you can't really shut it off. Like, you can sort of say, okay, no, I'm just not going to drink. But then obviously you'll be pulled in any direction. But obviously you've made a value judgment that long term, or overall, from an overall well-being perspective, it's probably best not to drink.
But I just kind of just try not to go in those environments. And it's like for example, like when you're at a restaurant and you're on a diet, right? And you're looking at the menu and you're like, I just want to eat the pizza. Like, I absolutely want to order the pizza. Like, in that sense, it's like everyone wants to order the pizza. And this is one of those things with running. You know how people say like, I don't like running, I hate running. This is like one of my favorite things about Goggins, where Goggins is just like, yeah, I hate running too. It sucks. Like, running's only good when you finish. Like, in that sense, like, it sucks so bad. Like, like sometimes when you're deep into a run, but like, it's just getting that discipline to be able to just like do it, do stuff or not do stuff, even though it sucks. Like, in that sense.
Yeah, definitely. I think what Goggins talks about, looking at his shoes for half an hour in the morning. He's got that debate going on. Like, there's been heaps of podcasts I've listened to, and then also resonated with that sort of battle in the morning of, it's like, no matter how much, even though like we do, like you said, we love it from an overall perspective, but in the moment when you're like, sort of, your thoughts are flashing in, you're like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this.
I swear, like, every morning, I mean this without like, people don't need to worry about me. I'm not suicidal or anything, but like, I wake up every morning at 5 or 5:30 a.m. and I want to kill myself. Like, I wake up and I'm just like, oh, and then like, like by the time you get back from a run and stuff like that, you're good. Like, it's not like I wake up out of bed with my broccoli sticks and like do like a reverse backflip, like, my slide into my shoes and, run out of the house. It's not like that at all. Like, my brain is like literally wants to kill itself as soon as it opens its eyes. And then, you slowly like go for a run or a ride or like whatever, and everything becomes better. Like in that sense.
Yeah. And I know I know we're sort of pushing it for time, but I just kind of thought about one other thing.
Go for
A
it.
word you mentioned, which was leadership. What have you learned, obviously, from leading a group of people? What have you learned from the beginning of that process to now? Like, what are some of the things you've learned about? You mentioned relationship building, but maybe leadership a bit more specifically.
Yeah, I think a huge part of leadership is just asking questions, and just being really, really good at asking questions. Because, like I said this in the Graduate Theory podcast, like you're going to hire people to do jobs that you don't know how to do. And like, you see all those sort of like Silicon Valley sensationalist movies where like people will be like, how long is it going to take to get this done? You need to get this done in the next 5 days. And like, I don't even know how to do that job. I don't know how long it takes. I don't even know like what someone would have to do that job. Like, how can I just sit there and demand it be done in a certain time frame? And so like, I think leadership is just about like patience and like asking questions. Like that's really what it is. And I think leaders don't do that enough and really humble themselves. You don't. I think everyone just thinks it's like about telling everyone what to do, but oftentimes it's leadership is about gathering information and making judgments. Like in that sense, it's not so much about like dictating and whatever. And you know, you sort of like say you're talking to an engineer, they might explain to you how hard something is, and you listen that time, and then you ask them another question, and then you listen that time, and then you ask them another question, you listen that time, and then you're asking them a question about something else, and then you can start to challenge them. You're like, oh, but you said that like when we're like uploading photos that you're having this challenge, so wouldn't it mean that when we're uploading videos this happens? Because you can start to put your sort of like own logic to it, and you start to like understand because you asked questions and you listened and all those kind of things. But I think another part to leadership of something that I've just been doing recently is just like when you're a leader, you're kind of like you have a lot of certainty, like you have a lot of uncertainty because you got to decide what to do and all that sort of stuff. But you're the guy, like you go to work every day, you decide what to do. Like I think it's important as a leader to put yourself in situations where you're like the noob, like go and learn like a new sport or something where like you're like a no one, and like you have to go and learn how to do that thing and listen to people and be taught and go and be the student or the worker or whatever it is, so that you sort of like know both sides of the table. I guess that would be one thing. One other thing just to end on, I think it's just something interesting that I've started to think about in these sort of years. Like, I mean, I'm 29 now, probably going to be having a kid in the next few years. Something I think about a lot is like with exercise and health and all these kind of things is just like really thinking about like what kind of dad I want to be, like in that sense. And so like you can think about like I love this analogy that Tim Ferriss says, like people have kids and it's kind of like they just got thrown into a boxing ring and did no training. Like in that sense. And like I just think about that a lot. Like what kind of fitness do I need to have? Like, what kind of skills do I want to be able to have to like what kind of educate, like what do I want to learn now that I can like teach my kids and all those sort of things, and like being able to be fit and mobile and flexible and all those things for like as long as possible in that capacity. Like that's kind of what's interesting to me these days as well, that like also helps me maintain my diet, maintain my fitness, well-being, and like all those kind of things, like just having those sort of like purposes that are bigger than you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Dom, do you have... I can't see you, so it's hard to... if you're gonna ask a question.
No,
Your
no,
camera will probably work if you turn it back on. Let's see if it wraps up.
Here we go. Yeah. Oh, there we go.
Hey! Dom?
No, I'm all good, mate.
You're good? Well,
yeah.
we will end on the question we ask every guest at the end of the episode, which is... what's your... Geez, we didn't talk about... We talked about sort of everything, which has been awesome. I really enjoyed it. But what's your sort of favorite race, would you say? And why?
Like as in distance?
No, so like normally we talk about a particular event, so it doesn't have to be...
Okay, right.
Yeah.
Right. I would say My favorite event was definitely so far has been the Santa Cruz triathlon. I think that's what migrated me from running into triathlons as well. But I've kind of noticed a lot of triathletes, ex triathletes, are just ultra runners after their full triathlon career. So I've kind of got an inkling into the fact that I'm probably going to get over it and head back into running solely. I've noticed like a lot of ultra runners and stuff are ex triathletes. I don't know, for some reason they just kind of get over it, or maybe it takes too much time. I don't know, but for now it's interesting to me. I just really enjoyed it, and it was like something that I never thought that I would be able to do, like in that sense. And um, I've kind of been a runner since I was a kid, but like, swimming and cycling were like super new to me. And it was kind of like back to what I was saying about those like challenges and I actually did like really well in the race and surprised myself to the point where I was like, oh, okay, now I'm going to do a half Ironman and then like an Ironman. And like, I have memories of seeing Ironman on the side of like Wheat Bix boxes and shit and being like, whoa, like that'd be crazy to be an Ironman, like in that sense. And
Yeah,
now it's within reach. Like, like I'll be doing a half Ironman in 2 months and I'm pretty confident about that race. Like my training's been super solid. And, after that it's an Ironman and, that's a super, super exciting thing. So I think that Half Moon Bay triathlon has sort of shifted my trajectory. I was just kind of doing like marathon after marathon and some trail runs and all that kind of thing. And, but one of my sort of bucket lists is definitely a 100 miler. So that's something I want to get up
yeah,
to. What you're heading into, Dom. I think it's like one of those. It's one of those things like that you enter a different club.
Mm,
You get to roll with the big boys once you pass the 100 miles.
definitely. I think I've got a lot more respect for the people that can get through something like that after attempting one.
But now
I
you
think
listen to all these podcasts, like 100 miles is just like the entry gate. Like you
yeah,
listen to these people doing like
Yeah.
240s, 300s, like
Mm.
what's his name? Robbie, the guy who outran the Tesla recently. What's his name? Robbie Ballinger. Do you follow Robbie Ballinger?
No.
No.
no,
He did a challenge recently where a Tesla drove to it's like until it ran out of fuel, and to win the Tesla he had to run further than the Tesla got, and he did. Like in the end it was 300 and something miles or whatever it was.
Oh my gosh.
And like these people are running like 400-500K races, man. Like it's just like
right.
100 miles is like what people are just kind of that's your buy-in to playing with those people, like in that sense, which is the scariest thing in the world when you think about it.
Yeah,
Mm.
it was crazy. The race that I did, there was 80 people signed up and 20 people finished. So it's like it's just insane. Like
That's even like that's a pretty high finish rate for that. But I mean, there's a certain type of person that signs up for 100 milers though. Like
yeah,
it's
Yeah.
not like it's not like your average Joe. But I think one thing that I don't know if you guys know this statistic, but I've heard that 98% of people who start marathons finish them, um, which is kind of interesting. And I am always surprised by how scared people are to do a marathon. Like, you don't have to run a good time, but I think everybody should at least try and run a marathon. I think it's really good for you, like in that
Mm.
sense, to learn that you can do it. And most people, once they run a marathon, they just get like hooked. Like there's something about it that you do something that I feel like there's something that triggers in your brain. There's some like primal thing that you're like you just
mm,
tapped into some energy that you just have that you haven't used, like your ancestors used, but you haven't used, and you just can't not. Uh,
yeah,
you can't stop doing it in that sense.
Mm.
absolutely.
For sure. Which is we're certainly hooked into that.
For sure, yeah.
We can't stop running, and the only way to test that is by not running for a few days, I guess, and seeing
I
that
do
you're
have a
just so
question
compelled. Yeah.
for you
Sorry,
guys.
Robbie.
Do you know anyone like in your running circles who runs in like barefoot shoes?
I don't. Dom, do you?
Yeah, a handful of people. There's this like famous real old guy. He's like 60 or 70 now, and he's always run around in barefoot. But he's got like a couple of age group world records for like the 5K and the 10K and stuff. But he's really big on barefoot running and stuff like that. But and a few other people here and there do it, but no one does it
Yeah.
like heaps. Yeah.
I've just I started wearing barefoots like a year ago.
Mm.
It really changed everything for me in terms like I don't get like my toenails don't fall off anymore and my recovery is like heaps quicker and stuff like that. But as I'm getting into these like longer and longer runs and especially trail runs, I'm just wondering, like, is there going to be a point where it's just like not possible anymore? Like in that sense, like I've done marathons and longer runs, but like a trail run, like you're starting to get into like heavy stones and like all these kind of things and whatever. But I was
Yeah.
just curious on if you guys have had any perspective. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Like ever since I bought a pair of barefoots, I haven't worn a single pair of other shoes since
Mm.
I've owned them.
Mm.
But yeah, it's definitely a preference thing. Again, back to what we were saying about diets and stuff. Like, there's like minimalists and maximalists. Like, there's the other people that love those like Hocker mattresses that
Yeah.
literally are like
Yeah, that's a good way to look at those shoes for sure.
yeah. So I was just curious what you guys would say, but yeah. Anyway,
Yeah, I think
Well-
all the trail running shoes are like pretty like low drop. They're all pretty much zero drop, so it's pretty similar to running barefoot, anyways. And I think there is like a few options as well for more like minimalist kind of shoes. But yeah,
what are you personally running?
I've got the Brooks Catamount, which is it's not too bad. It's got like a rock plate in the shoe to help with like running over stones and stuff like that. And yeah, I've found it to be okay. But they're all pretty good, I think.
What about you, Luke?
Normally running in what's it called Asics Nova Blast at the moment, and
Okay.
Endorphin Speed 2s, and then I've actually been training like doing sessions in super shoes, which I don't know how
What
good
are
that
super
is.
shoes?
Like those
Those good ones.
like the carbon plated ones, the ones you would typically race in, being so Nike Alpha Flies or the Vapor Flies.
Are they like sprinting? Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah, I understand.
They're
what a
just the
super shoe-
fancy ones you're meant to get 4 or 5% more efficiency out of, that sort of thing. But
Can I make a request to the podcast? When you guys are asking people what their training schedule was for that week, can you ask them what shoes they wear? I'd just be curious
Yeah.
to see like what
Yeah,
answers
that's
you
a good
guys
point.
get. I'd actually be curious. I think it's like such a fascinating
Yeah.
concept of like how much diversity you sort of see between like if there's like a heaps common shoe or everybody's just completely different or whatever.
Mm.
And if
Definitely.
there's a trend and like the best runners, if they're wearing like a certain type of shoe or something like that, I don't know. There probably is no trend, but we'll see. But yeah, coming up on time. I just want to say thanks, guys. Like it was a lot of fun, and I know that you guys are having people on who run like 100 miles and all these kind of things, and I definitely haven't gotten there yet, but I will. It's a plan, and so it's coming. Maybe we can do another podcast once I've actually breached that.
Yeah.
I've
100%.
I've entered the club. I don't know how long that's going to take, but hopefully not long from now. But yeah, thank you. I'm humbled to sort of be a guest here, and it's been a lot of fun.
No, thanks, Robbie. I mean, we've had a chat not specific about running, but incredibly interesting, and makes me wonder a little bit sort of how much we leave on the table by talking very specifically about running. So, but no,
It was actually something I was worried about in that sense because I was like, at the moment I'm training for a triathlon, so it's like I've actually like veered away from not away. Running's still a huge part of it. But
yeah.
No,
It's been awesome. Really appreciate it.
Anyway, we'll wrap it on that note. But yeah, good luck and let me know if I can help you guys in any way.
Cheers, mate. Thanks for coming on.